Physical abuse, rotten food, denial of basic health care and sanitation. This is the life of people held in ICE detention centers. My name is Haddy Gassama, and I serve as a senior policy counsel with the ACLU's immigration policy team. Today, we're going to be making sense of immigration detention under the Trump administration. Let's dive in with your first question. Could you give us a brief history of ICE detention facilities? ICE didn't exist until 2003. It was created after 9/11 when the old agency that governed immigration was replaced with what we now know as DHS. And under DHS, these sub-agencies were created: ICE, CBP, and USCIS. Even though the practice of immigration detention is much older, the scale at which ICE is detaining people is one that we've not seen in the history of immigration detention. During the 1800s, there was no real immigration detention system as we understand it now, but the practice did exist at places that you all have heard of, like Ellis Island or Angel Island on the West Coast, and they were places that were meant to process people seeking safety, seeking new life in this country. However, under policies like the Chinese Exclusion Act, for example, people were sometimes held in these facilities for weeks or months on end while their cases were being reviewed. In the 1970s, detention was, for the most part, minimal. Most immigrants were released on parole or bond while their cases proceeded. But then in the 80s and 90s, a series of new laws came about which essentially expanded the immigration detention system. It expanded the police system, disproportionately impacting Black immigrants. Then, in 1996, they dramatically expanded the aggravated felony category. It included minor and nonviolent offenses and mandated detention for anyone convicted, even retroactively, hitting even long-time and lawful permanent residents. Today, ICE has more than 200 detention facilities across the country, and at the end of 2025, ICE was holding a record number of roughly 70,000 people a day. This is the highest in the agency's history. All right, next question. Is detaining immigrants legal? That's a good question. Technically, the government has some authority to detain immigrants, but that authority also has limits. It can't detain someone, for example, who has legal status like TPS, which is temporary protected status. They're not supposed to detain certain green card holders and certainly U.S. citizens. Yet these are all categories of people we have seen detained under this administration. And even for people who are in removal proceedings, the government generally can't detain them without some review of whether detention is actually necessary. But since July of 2025, this administration has denied bond hearings to anyone who's entered the country without inspection. And multiple courts have found that to be unlawful under the Immigration and Nationality Act and that it goes against due process principles. This is all part of a larger pattern: expand detention first and litigate afterwards. All right. Next question. How can you contact a detained person in a center? Technically, ICE does have an online detainee locator system where families can search for their loved ones through their name, their date of birth, or their A number. However, in practice, many families describe it as really unreliable. It's often lagging. People get transferred without notice or updates to that system, and phone access in ICE facilities is notoriously limited. It's often monitored, and sometimes detained individuals have to pay to make calls. Attorneys are supposed to have the right to confidential calls and access to their clients, but at facilities like Alligator Alcatraz, attorneys could not find their clients oftentimes, and when they would show up on the detainee locator system, they could not access their clients through phone calls. The ACLU of Florida, along with partner organizations, sued very early on to get attorneys access to their clients. And the fact that the facility is now closed is in large part due to the level of advocacy and work done. Why are detention centers able to withhold detainee information? DHS will often argue that this is an issue of protecting the privacy of detained people. The reality is that oftentimes detained individuals want their information to be shared, and they've gone to great lengths in many cases to shine a light onto the conditions that they're experiencing. We've seen hunger strikes across the country where detained individuals are choosing to starve themselves to bring light to how horrific the conditions are. We've seen denial of medical care, unsafe water, spoiled food. But any meaningful oversight has often been deliberately narrowed. The administration has also restricted many members of Congress' physical access to detention facilities, constantly changing policies around when a member of Congress can visit and how much notice they should provide. And there's just no independent body with consistent real-time access to detention facilities and the conditions inside these facilities. There have been a lot of reports of people dying in ICE detention. Why is that happening, and is it common? That is a heavy one. The rates of deaths that we're seeing under this administration is one of the clearest and honestly most predictable signs of a system that is expanding faster than it can be held accountable. In 2025 alone, we saw about 30 deaths, making it the deadliest year for the agency since 2004. And 2026 is on a path to match that. It's important to name that these deaths and these types of horrific things that are happening in these facilities are wholly preventable and also predictable. Deaths in custody are only one part of the insidious picture of what this current administration is doing. ICE and Border Patrol agents have also fatally shot people during enforcement operations in communities across the United States. Renee Good, Alex Preddy, and recently Lorenzo Salgado Arojo, a Houston father of 3, was fatally shot during a vehicle stop. Federal officials have defended these shootings as self-defense, and in each case, witnesses and video evidence obtained by journalists have contradicted parts of the government's account. ICE has now been in existence for about 23 years, and it simply cannot continue the course that it is on. The agency needs fundamental reform, and a new immigration management system that centers humanity and dignity is what is needed. Thank you so much for all your wonderful and insightful questions. It's not lost on me that this is a heavy topic, but just the level of interest in what is happening in immigration detention facilities across the country is in and of itself inspiring. If you have any other questions about ICE detention, feel free to drop them in the comments below. And remember to like and subscribe to the ACLU's YouTube channel for future episodes of Making Sense.